Welcome to my channel. I continue to film all my coloring books, and I was thinking that I will have to do two shameful videos. One about all my untouched books, and I have plenty of them. And the second shameful video is where I will tell that this year I didn't color in the books by H.Karlzon. But then I checked and I was lucky that at least in the beginning of the year I did several quite nice works in H.Karlzon, so at least that's my excuse. Of course, I am kidding about shameful videos, but it's a big regret that somehow I hadn't colored that much in Hannah's books this year, and it will be my biggest promise to myself for the next year to color more of her beautiful pictures, especially now when I have her Forest Kingdom, and of course I want to color more in Midnight Masquerade. I hope that here will work the idea that in the oldest books pictures they are already a little bit how to say, I got used to them. I saw beautiful colored pictures, so it's even if a lot of them they are very beautiful in the first book, in the second book, still to color in the newest books when I didn't see many finished projects, it's easier for me, and probably I will start from the Forest Kingdom and Midnight Masquerade, but I also hope to continue to color in my old books. This year, surprisingly, the most popular my book was Seasons, and I also did a work in jewelry box. But well, let's start in the order from the first book until the last. I was waited for a long time until I finally got my first book by H.Karlzon. I didn't have Prismacolors when I got it, so in this book we have various works. From my first attempts to do something with the watercolor for the background until the later works which I am extremely proud of. Well, sorry, but it will be easier for me to go from the end of the book to flip. Here I think that I used Prismacolors. I definitely can recognize all those mahogany red, clay rose, so it was one of the first pictures which I did when I finally got myself set of Prismacolors. I did a couple of my first works in summer nights, and then I switched to these beautiful buildings. I always wanted to color them, but when I watched YouTube videos I realized that pencils which I got like Color Softs, they won't be able to blend as smoothly as I saw Prismacolors, so I had to wait until I finally was able to get myself a set of Prismas, and then my journey started. Here it's one of the works which I really love, very old, but I remember how proud I was how I did these unusual leaves. Instead of traditional green, they are more gray, and I also added those yellow highlights along the edges. I also love the second type of the leaves with great lavender, peach and yellow. You can see that it's in relatively a limited color palette, and I am still quite fond of this work. I do love the color combo, very romantic looking pastel flowers and contrast which created those intense blue butterflies. Next one, also one of the first works, and that's where I started to appreciate all the light colors of Prismacolor pencils here and on the gemstones, on the mushrooms. 4 years ago, or almost 5 years ago, I didn't think about deleting all the black lines, which probably would improve this work, but still I think that it's quite nice. I do love the girl here, always liked her face, she's very pretty. That's the work which I did using my old pencils. I think that I used some Color Softs, some Faber-Castell Echo, and at the moment when I added those leaves to the background, maybe they are almost invisible, they are also outlined with white gel pen, I was extremely proud of my creativity. Maybe it's fun to hear, but at that moment I thought that it's a very good improvement to the background, that I decided to add something from myself. And again you can see that I didn't work on the wings with a white gel pen. Here I have some pictures where I just tried something, some color combos on the pencils, some watercolor backgrounds. I even have one work finished with ink tents. And probably it was my first page apart from Lizzie Mary Cullen's books where I tried to use ink tents, and it was totally different experience somehow, as they worked really well here, so page isn't that bad. I think that ink tents, they are pretty nice for all the underwater scenes. They have quite nice color palette for such things. That's my beautiful squirrel. I already shown this picture when I demonstrated video how I practiced in coloring animals, and it was one of the successful squirrels. I decided first that cats and squirrels are easiest animals to practice on. Here we have relatively easy fur, just orange, brown and something dark, almost black, so that's where I started my color palette. The background actually is shiny because on top of the gray-blue pencils I also added matching colors of pearl watercolors. And again it was another one of the practices how to color gold, and I'm still quite happy with this page. Background made with acrylic paint. I do love the different matte texture here and waxy shining of prismas on the frame, pearlescent on the background. I think that it looks even magical a little bit. Next one is old work made with color softs and Faber-Castell Eco and soft pastel for the background. That's when I realized that probably I have to postpone coloring in this book if I wanted to get results which I saw on videos on Instagram until I get my set of Prismacolors, because I was totally unsatisfied with the colors and especially with the background. Next one I absolutely love, and I always consider it as one of my best works in Hannah's books. I call it Moon Hair. In the beginning I was afraid that they have slightly similar colors and a lot of gray here and even on the plants, on the leaves, but in the end everything worked really well, mostly because of the brown which I added here together with gray. So with the brighter mushrooms and some brighter flowers, I think that everything looks quite good. So it's definitely one of my most loved works in the books by Hannah. This one I did with prismas. I was like crazy happy, high happy when I got them, how they blended, how it was easy to do gradient from darker to light colors. So I experimented like crazy with all color combos. It was one of the very happy moments of discoveries. Next I have these pictures, and between them there are probably 3 or 4 years, and I love them both. Apart from the crab here. Here I did a huge experiment with this watercolor made with various types of watercolor paints, together regular matte and then pearl, which helped me to create this foam on the surface of the ocean water. I was so happy with the background. I was so invested into thoughts about the background that I didn't pay much attention to the crab. It's not my favorite type of coloring when I need to color pattern. I prefer more realistic images. So here probably wasn't the best choice of colors, but in the end I got a huge experience about watercolor backgrounds from just this one page. So that's why I always will be grateful to this crab. This one is definitely good. I like it, mostly because I like how I did fish. I struggled a little bit with the background. It was excessive amount of those dots, which probably they represented bubbles of air in the water, but it was too much. I tried to mask them with various media. I hope that now they are not as visible as they were. On the darker area of the background, I didn't mind to have them, but here they disturbed me somehow. When I was young, I had an aquarium with fishes, so I was quite familiar how dark fishes they have black, dark blue colors, but they also are shiny and they have many additional color accents. So if you look at mostly blue fish, you can also see a little bit of purple into it, a little bit of more gray, lavender, pink colors, and that's what I tried to show here, that it has a very shiny scales, especially on the central part of the body, and the rest of the page also was quite nice. Oh, look at one of my oldest works. I don't remember, I think that the background is soft pastels and the rest is probably color softs. I definitely think that color softs, they have colors very good for frogs, but not very good for the leaves. Too bright greens. Another one of very old works where I used Faber-Castell Eco. It was a nightmare to use these pencils for the background. They are harder, they are waxy, not too much pigment, but for some of the areas it was possible to use them, and flowers I did with color softs. Something which I decided that I don't want to continue. That was my first watercolor background. It was some kind of a revelation for me when I realized that I actually can use watercolor in these books and in both Swedish editions of various publishers, in Dutch edition, in English edition. I never have problems with watercolor, with bleeding through. So maybe I'm just lucky, maybe I use a very moderate amount of water. Anyway, watercolor started to be a very essential part in doing pictures here, and the best works I think that I did using mixed media, together watercolor and pencils. I definitely want to do more works here. Many pictures are quite nice. In the beginning, when everyone colored just these books, I was a little bit overwhelmed with all the finished pictures I saw, but now they are not as popular, so maybe it's time to return to them. Well, maybe next will be Summer Nights, just in order of publishing. Again, let me start from the back. Here I have a lesser amount of finished pictures, if I remember correctly, but still I have this sleeping mice, and I do love the background here, but mice I wasn't very successful to do here. Texture on them to make them more realistic. Maybe I overworked a little bit with white Posca, but at the moment it was the only thing I had to draw thin lines. Maybe instead of white I needed to find some gray liner to make more interesting fur, but still I do love the unusual mushrooms. At least everything around it was fun to do. I decided that one of the plants it will be magically shining. It's source of the light here. That's why it has some kind of light halo around and all those dots. And also another source of the light is coming from inside of the mice house. Well, that was my third Here, let's start from this one because it was my first page, which I did immediately when I got Prismacolor pencils. I still remember all those emotions because before Prismacolors I never was a huge fan of pencils. When I was a child, of course, I preferred to use felt tip pens, and I also loved to color with watercolor paints because when I was a child, gouache paints, watercolor paints, we had them in quite decent quality even in children's set, but pencils they were terrible, always hard, very um, not very pigmented. They were scratchy, so I hated to use pencils and almost never used them. So when I discovered how soft and creamy can be pencils, and believe me, now when people are not familiar with art stores, with art supplies, and when they look at my works, they remember their own childhood experience with all those terrible hard pencils, and they never believe that pencils can provide such softness, such coverage, and such layering here. But anyway, that was my first Prismacolor page. The second one was this. I always had a very soft spot for Hannah's berries. I do love to color such berries in Clara Markova now, and I love to color them in Hannah's works. So in the book I always try to select pictures with mushrooms and with berries on the first turn. And the third was this one. You can see how I played with colors, and from this time all purple, violet, magenta colors, they are always my favorites in Prismacolor set. And I love to do yellow berries. I do them quite frequently. This one I did with color softs, and I tried to find a page where I don't have to use greens, which is a very weak point of color soft pencils, but instead all those purples, dark red, loganberry, blackberry, these colors they are quite good, so I was able to use them for this magical pheasant, peacock probably, for this magical bird. And for the background I decided to do something very light, so I did circles with soft pastel in matching colors, just not so intense. Some experiments which I hadn't finished. Another page where I tried to experiment with the background, but I can't say that I like it. I definitely now can't look at these flowers and to think that they would be much better with all the black lines hidden. It's not important because we have many similar pictures, so if one doesn't work, I can always continue my experiments on other similar pictures. This one I do love. It was a good thing to practice, even if in the beginning I had a slightly different idea for the background. I wanted to do it more like a gemstone, like turquoise. Now it looks like several stones connected. But it was interesting to practice, and of course black background always provides such a good contrast to the main objects. So here we have magical flying fishes. Another not very successful experiment. You may notice that as I am not a huge lover of insects, even when they turned into some kind of jewelry, I prefer to practice on such pictures where I don't care about the main image. Well, it's another very old work. When I started to color, I prefer to select pictures where animals are relatively small, so I don't have to work that hard on the texture here, so just on colors. The background, it wasn't very successful. I had the idea to do the impression of falling stars, and mice actually tried to catch them, but somehow all those diagonal lines, probably it was too much. Maybe the background in one color and falling stars indicated by gel pen, it would be a little bit better. Now it looks too monotonous also. diagonal lines. But it was another page where I practiced how to highlight some parts of the objects using white pencil on top of the dark pencil, and that's why I quite nice remember how I did this page. Finally, we go to Magical Dawn, where I did a lot of pictures. For probably a year or maybe 2 years, it was one of the most popular books on my channel and on Patreon, so here I have a lot of old works. Here I even managed to color the title page, and it's definitely one of my best finished title pages, which I did from the beginning to the end, and where I do love the result, so it's surprisingly well. I really tried to make it very magical, trying to think how stardust have to look and rainbow lights. So I think that maybe it's too colorful, but still it's a good start for good opening for this magical book. I experimented with many media here. For example, here I think that I used first watercolor in olive green color. I wasn't very happy, so in some of the areas I covered it very thoroughly with the dots in it like pistachio green, then bronze and black. They all have slightly different texture, pearl, metal and matte acrylic paints all, and I wanted to create this impression of a very magical forest background, because she is some kind of the forest queen. She has a lot of plants, here mushrooms and also magical owl. She is quite fun. Maybe now I would select, instead of the green background, something more contrast, but still I do love it, and green background match her red hair, so it's very classic match with green and a red head girl. Let me adjust my book to put both pictures in the screen. This one, it's normal, nothing bad, nothing good. I wanted to make the relatively dark background behind the mouse to make it slightly lighter, then going to the edges of the page darker. Then I experimented with mushrooms in various colors. So it was old but relatively nice work. This one is definitely in my top list of works, even if it's very old. I'm still surprised each time when I look at it how I managed to do this background. And it's all because of the great Prismacolor pencils. With all those beige, light brown, various gray colors, I managed to do this background which imitate hieroglyphs from Egypt, obviously, and I think the texture and color of the stone traditional for Egypt I managed to catch pretty nice. Of course, I used a lot of reference pictures, but I think that I managed to show this impression of the signs of the hieroglyphs imprinted, carved into the surface of the stone quite well. For the scarabée beetle, I was inspired by the various jewelry found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and all those cobalt, indigo, turquoise colors and a lot of gold. Of course, all those colors you can find in many jewelry, in many things from Egypt, in Egyptian museum, and I used these quite traditional colors. I think that apart from the background, I also was quite proud of the golden plate behind the beetle, that it has shadows, highlights here, and the most challenging part was to do this probably aquamarine gemstones. Next one, I almost ruined it. I dislike the background. It's again very old work. Next I had this experiment with tiny tiles. On the background I have two similar pages. This one because the initial image, it wasn't something special, some strange flowers, but if we have some not very inspiring image, it's easier to experiment on the color palettes, on the background, and that's exactly what I did here. The black flowers, maybe black chrysanthemum, they also are shiny because on top of the pencils I used very shiny bronze and gold acrylic paint. Here I think that my only idea was to try to use very bright green colors, which I had a lot in my pencil set somewhere, at least for the backgrounds. It was the only idea for this page. I still hope that one day I will return to this cat, but I totally want to transform it to normal instead of the vampire cat. I want to do something nice and fluffy. Here some of my experiments with watercolor, with Prismacolor pencils. Another one where I tried to combine gouache with regular watercolors. This one I absolutely love because of the unusual color palette on the leaves and on the sky, and after this page I use this palette very frequently. If you look at all my works, you will see this color combos, both this and this, quite often. Here I used Neocolor crayons and then a lot of pencils on top of them. Here it was one of the first portraits which I did. I hoped that as her face isn't that big that I will be able to color it without ruining, but of course nothing complicated, very easy shading. And to color golden frame was much more interesting to me, and those colors on the birds, ravens probably. Another one with watercolor and pencils. This one I used when I wanted to try how to do darker skin tone. Well, I would say that for the first attempt it wasn't that bad, but I constantly was distracted by the tattoo around her eyes, which I didn't like, but I didn't know how to mask it, and I struggled what to do with the empty background on the right side. So I colored quite easily the snake here, snake on her hair. I selected color for her dress. On the background I tried to draw fire, but I'm not sure if I succeeded or not. Maybe I had to use something different for the gemstone here, but it's reflecting fire behind. Anyway, at that moment it was what I was able to do at top of my skills, and I'm still proud of it. I added a little bit more of my own gemstones to her hair because they were extremely dark, flat and black, so I needed something here. I added golden things. Well, this one I do love because of the crazy background. It's huge amount of regular watercolor and then huge amount of pearl watercolor on top of it, so now it's everything. It's definitely magical, shiny. If we think about magical forest, then we have some magical plants probably, and also some crystals, and everything is shiny. That's what I tried to show here. I'm proud how I did all the reflections and highlights on the glass surface here. It was one of my first practices how to do glass, and even if here I did two mistakes, because through this bottle, through the glass, you can't see the edge of the ground probably. Here, this line, it have to be visible if the glass is transparent. And also through the first glass, you have to be able to see this glass dome. So here I had to draw this image, even if it's not visible in H.Karlzon's drawing. So I know about this mistake, but still I do love this page because it was so much fun to work with paints. I think that now I am less adventurous. I started to color much more simply with pencils, and it's not always a good thing. I need to return to experiments. This one I do love, even if I had a lot of headache with this background. I tried to do something like a pattern on the wallpapers, and of course I didn't want to draw these designs just with my hand. I wasn't sure that I will be able to repeat the same ornament in similar way many times. So I tried to outline some kind of stencils first, but I somehow managed to mess it up, so I simply looked at these swirls and I draw them crazy way. But in the end I think that everything worked, and the portraits of the king bird and queen bird, now they look quite nice even on such complicated and quite intense background. Another experiment with the backgrounds, this time with watercolor. Here I wanted to do some kind of sinister garden with maybe some meat-eating flowers. That's why they look in such a strange way. I added this texture on the petals myself. I wanted first to do some kind of lace, but in the end ended with more simplified pattern, but still I like it, very interesting, at least unusual. Here is a Sven, which is very famous and very popular video on my YouTube channel. Again, because of the background, here I used several regular watercolors, then sprinkled with gouache and pearl watercolor. Then I added shape of the Sven stars in the sky, so I tried to make this background as fantasy and as interesting to look at as possible. The constellation of Sven, I remember the correct word. Oh, it was interesting work, and it was one of my first posted videos on Patreon page, so I'm still quite proud of this one. Well, the background, maybe even the simple black background would be quite nice, but still I thought that using first very dark brown regular watercolor, and then when it still was wet I added bronze and gold, so it created this interesting texture like probably some kind of gemstone. It worked really well with the peacock feathers, with the flowers which I added here. I even tried to mask those ugly things on her face. This one I hadn't finished. This one I do love in limited color palette. Here it's simple, but as a color palette of gold, red and black, it's always nice looking, very classical color combo. So even if I think that the empty background in the right upper corner, it doesn't match quite busy rest of the page, still I think that it was good, especially I love the golden birds here. Here I had another crazy experiment. This time I used Neocolor crayons for the butterfly, for the flowers, then watercolor in huge amount of colors to create this shiny crazy background. Here I have my quite popular cat, one of the pictures where I'm extremely proud how I did her fur, and everything else is quite nice. All these orange flowers and tiny red flowers, they add nice color accents, shiny mosses. A lot of works, but it was worth it. Another one of my favorite color combos when I use a very dark aquamarine green with black and with some bright accents like orange and red. I do love this, both gemstones on their backs. Another experiments with the background. I hope you can see how many colors I have in this background and how shiny is this fish. Next one I did using Neocolors and Prismacolor pencils. Something unusual for me, but again you can see some of my favorite color combos. All those pastel prismas, I always use them, and that's why I love Prismacolor set. Here are my lovely family of royal birds. Again, various watercolors, both metal and pearl, and a lot of work on their golden parts. I decided that the king will be mostly in blue, she will have also magenta, and their baby, it will have a mix of different feathers from mother and from father. Here I have my lady, where I decided to do some kind of flower background. It also was quite an interesting thing to do. Here I have my fire princess. She has again intense red watercolor for the background. Then I dropped a little bit of orange and golden watercolor here, and of course she also has similar sparkles on her hair. Everything is quite shiny. In the end I added those green elements, and it helped to attract attention to her face and eyes. This one I absolutely love. I did it when I got a set of Neocolor crayons, and that's where I realized how helpful they are for the backgrounds. Here it's quite nice and romantic looking. I even added some elements from myself, those flowers behind her shoulders and part of her dress, because she didn't have it. And I do love that she has pink hair. Finally, my angel cat. Background made with watercolor and neocolors, watercolor pearl and neocolor as the first step. Then with Prismacolors I did cat, but I told this story many times already. And I have here my melting mosses. They are made from ice, but when they approach fire, they slowly start to melt. And that's all for the magical dawn. Now we will move to seasons. When I got seasons, I thought that my favorite part of it will be autumn, but surprisingly now I have biggest amount of finished pictures in winter and also in spring parts. I even have the title page done. Here I used I think that Prismacolors together with Neocolor crayons. Next I experimented here again with acrylic paint and Neocolors, and I think that I get such coverage similar to the maybe frozen window from the third attempt, maybe fourth attempt, so it wasn't very easy coloring, even if it looks very simple. And here I experimented with Derwent Graphite. I really love how they muted, slightly dirty texture, how it provides contrast with the shiny and waxy finish of polychromos or Prismacolor pencils. Next here I have this adorable bunnies, everything made with polychromos, even the background. I think that it was one of the attempts to do bouquet background, which looks acceptable, so it's not that bad. Here I tried to mask that originally flowers they grow from the body of the bunnies, which I absolutely dislike. So I tried somehow to color that they are somewhere behind bunnies. They are just sitting near flowers. Anything else I do love. I do love how I did fur. Another one where I used watercolor, regular and pearl, so background is very shiny. I wanted to do some fantasy design inspired by the summer evenings or summer nights, because we have here bright summer nights. That's why I did such a background. And the rest simply Prismacolor pencils. I think that this video is on YouTube, so if you need, you can go to the seasons playlist. Here I can say that I am happy with the color which I selected for the background, but apart from this summer girl, it's not that bad. Again, I always try to mask all those freckles, dots, anything which Hannah's girls have on their faces. Sometimes I manage to mask it better, sometimes not so successfully, but I'm not a big lover of all those details which adds all those rings or tattoo or other drawings on faces. This one I absolutely love. I called it a house with golden chrysanthemum. I think that actually it's interesting color palette. I do love how I did this yellow flowers with more muted gold or even bronze leaves. They look really well together with the green beetles. And the color palette is quite pleasant. I think that I need to color something else, using various shades of green and bronze with small accents of dark red. I remember that the butterflies, they were the last element I had to color, and I had a lot of doubts of what to use, which color, maybe to do them white, like shiny and transparent with white wings. But in the end I decided to use this black and red, and I think that it wasn't a bad choice. I actually love how they look. The next one, probably it was one of my first works here, and again a lot of experimenting here, mixing various watercolor, different texture, regular and pearl shade. And then for the main image I used together Derwent drawing and Prismacolors. These pencils together also create interesting difference, a more muted natural colors of Derwent drawing together with quite intense and bright colors of Prismas. Oh, I remember that it was one of the first portraits which I actually tried to color in Hannah's books. First one was in Magical Dawn, that lady with two crows, and that was the second one. Again, at the moment I didn't mask black lines. Now I would prefer to have a lesser amount of black lines here on the hair, but face it was good until I started to color the page on the here, and I forgot to put paper between two pages. So as I am heavy-handed, and when I started to color this page, of course dark colors from the wings of the birds, they started to press into the next page. Usually I'm quite careful. When I just use my book, I don't put something between colored pages, because I never have problems when book just staying on the shelf. But indeed when I color something, usually I simply protect. And this time somehow I was distracted, I forget. Of course I tried to delete excessive pigment from her cheeks, from her face, but now she still looks a little bit dirty. Anyway, we are moving to the page which I did recently, probably the last month, and I absolutely love it. This time I tried to be quite slow and patient. You can see that I managed to delete almost all black lines, at least where I wanted to delete them. You can see that here I tried to be very patient and I managed to get rid of almost all black lines, and I think that in such way pictures they look much more interesting. Of course it takes probably 3 times longer to finish page, but the final look is much more interesting. So definitely in the future I will try to color in this in such way. So many pictures I want to do here. I want to do this spread and this page. Well, now we are moving to the winter part. Here I had, well, slightly ruined background. When I tested it, it actually was a relatively good idea, trying to add some kind of bokeh background on the sky. I wanted to do a very dark blue, blue with black background, and then to do bokeh background inspired by the colors of the northern lights, shades of green and shades of yellow pink. But in the end probably I added too much of them and they looked not like bokeh and more like bubbles, so it was a little bit strange on this page. And even with the plain blue background it would be better, because the whole attention in such way would go to the lanterns attached to the reindeer. But when I did it I had to save it somehow, so I sprinkled it with dark blue color and now it looks a little bit dirty. So I can't say that I'm happy with this page, but I do love how I did pine trees and all those crystals around the reindeer, and the fur also is not so bad. Anyway, it was an attempt when I realized that sometimes trying to do something very artistic or very creative, it's not always favorable for the final look of the page. Next I have an experiment, a big play with neocolor crayons, then with shiny metal watercolor, and I think that the whole page it looks very festive. I do love how I did candles. Again I tried to get rid of the black lines, because black lines indicated the light halo around candles, and I think that with white they look much better. And of course my favorite contrast between various yellow, ochre, orange colors with cold colors like blue or violet, it always works very well. Here I have another spread which I actually love. Here again I was a victim of experimenting. In my set of neocolor crayons I have several colors which I almost never use, and this dark blue-green color was one of them. I decided that at least somewhere I can use it, and I tried to mute a very intense blue-green, sprinkling on top of it a watercolor, and color was a white pearl. I tried to create impression of the frozen, slightly covered by snow background. It wasn't 100% as I imagined, but when I added darker shadows behind the main image, it started to look a little bit better. At least I do love how birds look together with such background, so it was interesting. As I always say, when you don't treasure too much your picture, when it's nothing very special here, like we have absolutely beautiful line art here and simple here, so it's easy, psychologically it's easy to experiment on such pictures. But here definitely is one of my best finished pictures. I absolutely love color palette here. Everything colored with prismas, and I really try to be very slow and very careful to do a very good gradient on the sky, to work on the fur here. And I think that it's good. Even if I was afraid that mice would be lost against similar color of the fur of the wild cat. Now I think that everything looks quite well, so I am happy. I am glad that the eyes, because of the more intense bright blue, they definitely are the focal point here, so exactly like I wanted to do. And that's everything for this one. And next we have jewelry box. Jewelry box, it's a lovely book, I like it, and I love to color Hannah's gemstones, crystals, jewelry, which she very frequently adds to her pages, so I was very happy when I got it. Here I have pictures with peacocks, you know that I love to color them, and here I have peacocks which I did with polychromos pencils. Well, here the bouquet background isn't that good, and I'm still not sure if I needed to add this bouquet on the background at all. Maybe with plain wine red background everything would be better, but the rest of the page I absolutely love. That on the feathers of peacocks we have slightly different shades of colors. They are mostly blue gray or green gray, but still they have a little bit of golden shining on the feathers, and together with the beautiful longer feathers of the tail, I think that the whole page, it looks very festive. Or again, I selected a page where I didn't care a lot about the main image. Here I don't mind to color insects because they actually don't look like beetles or insects, something which I am not very fond of. But indeed here we have it looks like jewelry. So that's why I knew which color palette I wanted to use. I wanted again to use contrast between cold and warm colors. As the last step, I decided that to add also wine red can be a nice addition. In the beginning I was thinking just about this aqua blue and golden wings, but the most interesting thing is of course the background. I covered everything with a very dark brown regular watercolor, so I got this matte surface, and then I started to add many things. I added metal pencils, I added pearl watercolors, so I think that I accidentally got such a look of the background, but I really like it. It looks quite interesting, magical, even slightly in steampunk style, so it was a very successful experiment. It's definitely one of my favorite finished Hannah's pictures in all my books, so I'm proud of myself. I started it just because I wanted to practice a little bit how to do wood with watercolor, and of course I love to color bottles. First, the brick wall, it didn't look so good, but I managed to do it from the second attempt. Then I did wooden shelves because on the original page they simply were like sampler without anything behind them. They were hanging in the air, so I did this wooden shelves. I decided that it's some kind of the special shelves for the potions. It was very fun to think what kind to use for the potions inside. I also tried to show that actually they are shiny, they can create some light, magical light, so we have all those reflections near the bottles. So it also was a very good work, and I'm honestly proud of myself that I managed to do it exactly like I imagined. Here I have portrait which I colored trying to illustrate a very famous fairy tale, at least famous for Russian people. It's called The Mistress of the Copper Mountains. It was written by Bajov. It's a very interesting story, a lot of legends from Ural region, and the lady which I did here is the mistress of the Copper Mountains, and she used a lot of emeralds and malachite in her jewelry and clothes. So that's why I decided that of course green will be the main color, and it was a big pleasure to do all those stones here. For the background again I mixed various shades of greens and various textures, regular and metal and pearl watercolors. Here I have my lovely cat. I don't know why, but I wanted to do something very romantic, very tender. That's why I have this delicate pink peach background, and flowers are almost white with just a little bit of lavender shading in the middle. Again, I tried to get rid of the black lines, and I think that it really helped to attract much more attention to the cat. I think that cat also looks romantic with the pink ribbon and this huge heart. I do love its eyes. And another peacock. It was probably the first page which I did in this book. Here I started to use neon color crayons when I just got them. I'm glad that I did white feathers, look really well, and my favorite probably color combo for peacocks is this very intense blue going into violet blue, then slightly going into more greenish blue. All those colors, they are very helpful when you need to do a lot of peacock feathers, and it also required a lot of patience to do all those tiny feathers in a slightly different way, adding highlights, but I think that it was worth it. Here I always say that it was my first successful attempt to do black fur, because I discovered that apart from gray and black, it's actually very helpful when you add some additional highlights. Here I added a little bit of black gray, so it has slightly purplish shade in a couple of places. It's almost invisible, but it helps to make cat less flat, more three-dimensional when you have additional color accents and nice highlights on the fur. Probably on her hair now I would be trying to get rid of all the lines here, so not as good work as on fur, definitely not enough texture, but still I love it, and I think that I called it Princess of Green Opals because of the background where I tried to recreate these gemstones. This one I did for Halloween, another experiment with the background, with watercolors again, and I do love it. Where is the next one? Here very traditionally neon colors, then on top of them a lot of shiny metal watercolor paints by Fine-Tech and Koloro, and then berries. Again, now I would prefer to outline all berries, but I think that it's still good. I remember that I was quite proud that I decided to do unusual color for the bees. Instead of the yellow and black, I decided that no, my bees, they will be purple lavender, and it definitely looks good against such color of the background. And finally, a page where I probably added the biggest amount elements from myself, because on the original picture she didn't have a lot of hair, she didn't have dress, she had only the jewelry here attached to the legs of the birds. Slightly strange composition, but I liked her. She has quite determined look, and I decided that she will have a very pale, almost white skin, so I had to apply several layers of paint because her face was covered by signs again, and I wanted to get rid of them. I left only one, and then I added a little bit more of her hair and then dress. I think that now it looks quite magical. I hope you can also see signs which I added with golden paint here. And finally, the last book by Hannah where I actually have finished works is Masquerade. Somehow I don't have any finished works in Soulmates. I started one, but something went wrong. It's not that bad, but I simply hadn't finished it yet. But in Masquerade I have finished pictures and I love them. I definitely will try to color it more during the next year. It's one of my biggest shames that I started this book and then I was distracted and I abandoned it. Let's start from this vampire beauty and her cat. I think that I selected it only because I was so attracted to her crown. It has so many interesting details. I wanted to use a very classic color combo of yellow, red and blue. And it also helped me to decide about the rest of the colors, similar color for the background, then her lips as a focal point probably of the whole composition. Again, very pale hair and skin because she is a vampire, but on this headpiece I remember that I spent huge amount of time coloring all the details. As the next one I have my vase with flowers. Again, one of the works which I consider as a big success. Even the background I did with Prismacolors. Now I think that maybe another layer would be favorable, at least here on these lower areas. But the look of the page, it's nice. I do love how yellow looks together with all the purple magenta colors. And I do love how I did this old bronze vase. And finally I have here my Marie Antoinette, which I included in my top list of finished pictures of this year, mostly because everything here was slightly unusual for me. Media, which I used because I combined Prismacolors with Derwent graffiti pencils for the background. Then how I managed to mask all the black lines, it's still a surprise for me because it was a huge amount of them on her hair and all the jewelry. And the color palette without too many bright colors, also unusual for me. Everything is very tender pastel, of course inspired by Marie Antoinette portraits, so I am also very proud of this work. Well, that's all I can show you in the books by Hannah. I hope that next year I will be able to show you much more new works, and I don't know why I abandoned Hannah this year so much. Maybe I was distracted by the newer book. Maybe I wanted to try new artists when I got books by new artists which I hadn't tested yet. Of course, I wanted to try them. It's the only explanation. Oh, I also was very invested into romantic country books and they require a lot of time, so probably that's another reason. Because as an anyway, without any explanations, let's say that I do love Hannah. I even love many pictures in her first books and her last books. This one and Forest Kingdom, they are even better for me, much better. I'm very happy that with each new book, Hannah's style, it slightly develops. She's definitely an artist, which for me, she improves her style. She doesn't stay on one spot. And of course, I will try to collect all her books. Thank you. Let's wait for the newest book, which Hannah already started to show. Just small pictures on her Instagram. I'm sure that the newest book also will be beautiful.